A bright morning sun illuminated the normally bustling streets of Atlanta, but there was a somber hush that no one could ignore. Flyers, tacked onto telephone poles and pinned behind cafe windows, bore the face of a missing teenager named Tamara Wilson. Her eyes hopeful, her expression innocent. Worried whispers coursed through the neighborhood. Why did Tamara vanish? Where could she be? Her mysterious disappearance gnawed at the community's nerves, leaving only rumors and an unshakable dread in its wake. But when a dedicated police officer finally followed a clue to her whereabouts, he uncovered a secret so dark it threatened to shatter everything they believed. Tamara Wilson was raised in a modest single-bedroom apartment in the heart of Atlanta, a stone's throw from a small convenience store on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard. She lived with her mother, Linda, an overworked nursing assistant who clocked in unpredictable hours at Grady Memorial Hospital. Despite their financial hurdles, Linda made sure Tamara had everything she needed: a sturdy backpack for school, a hot meal each evening, and unyielding love. Every day around 7 a.m., Linda boarded the city bus to head to her shift, leaving Tamara to walk to the nearby charter school. Tamara, an honors student known for her shy demeanor and fierce intelligence, kept mostly to herself. She dreamed of going to college, maybe Spelman, or somewhere even more prestigious, just to show she could defy the odds stacked against her. In a city where bright opportunities often appeared miles away from the reality of many families, Tamara's boundless potential shone like a beacon, and then, one day, that beacon vanished. 2 weeks before Tamara's scheduled finals, Linda arrived home from a grueling night shift to find the apartment locked but empty. Her daughter's bed was untouched, her backpack still resting on the couch, and her phone left behind on the charger. It took Linda only seconds to realize something was terribly wrong. Tamara wouldn't have left the house without her cell phone. She was cautious and always texted her mother when she went anywhere. Heart pounding, Linda immediately called the Atlanta Police Department and filed a missing person report. She also called every neighbor, every acquaintance, everyone who might have seen or heard something, but no one could shed light on Tamara's whereabouts. For the first few days, Linda couldn't sleep. She plastered the entire area with flyers, standing in lines at supermarkets and the local post office, determined that every single person in the neighborhood be aware that her daughter was missing. Concerned local volunteers joined the effort, scouring the streets, stopping passers-by, and distributing images of Tamara. But it seemed like Tamara had simply vanished into thin air. A sense of dread hung in the air like a suffocating blanket. People whispered rumors maybe Tamara had run away, lured by promises of a better life somewhere else. Others speculated a kidnapping. Some pointed to the rising incidence of human trafficking that plagued not just Atlanta, but large cities across the country. Local reporters from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution picked up the story briefly, running a small segment about the disappearance of the bright, ambitious teen. But in a city teeming with daily headlines, Tamara's story threatened to become just another statistic. Enter Detective Jared Brown. A seasoned officer of the Atlanta Police Department, Detective Brown had transferred to missing persons from homicide just 6 months prior. He was known for being methodical, empathetic, and unafraid of ruffling feathers if it meant finding answers. He had witnessed the heartbreak of many families who lost children to abductions, or even more tragically, had never known what happened to them at all. To Detective Brown, every missing child was personal, and every wasted second was one that could cost a life. The first step for Detective Brown was a meticulous review of the initial police report. Most missing teens, especially those who left their phones behind, fell into one of two categories: runaways escaping a troubled home or abductions. The phone detail set off alarm bells in his mind. Even if a teen planned to run away, A phone was their lifeline. Was it possible Tamara was forcibly taken, leaving no time to grab her phone? He sat down with Linda in her cramped living room. She recounted her daily schedule, explaining how she left for work early and always found Tamara at home in the afternoon. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, no strange calls, no new friends Linda was unaware of. What Linda did mention, though, was Tamara's father, who had resurfaced in the girl's life a few months prior, sending sporadic messages on social media. Linda said that Tamara seemed excited to reconnect, but Linda was uneasy. A father who had disappeared for years only to reappear seemed suspicious. The father lived in Alabama, but Linda had no contact information. She only had the memory that his name was Russell Davis. Detective Brown took notes methodically, then spoke to neighbors. One claimed he had seen a young man knocking on Linda's door the day Tamara disappeared. Another insisted she heard voices in the hallway, with Tamara's name being called urgently. But the details were fuzzy, and no one was certain of a precise timeline. With little more to go on, Brown requested phone records and social media data from Tamara's internet provider. He tapped into the FBI's National Crime Information Center (NCIC) to list Tamara as a missing person. He also enlisted the help of Officer Maria Green, a diligent investigator with a keen sense for patterns. Together, they pored over every detail, determined not to let Tamara's case become another cold file. 2 weeks passed. Brown's daily routine consisted of phone calls, interviews, cross-checking any new runaways or suspicious incidents around the area, but nothing panned out. The leads were either too vague or led to dead ends. One tipster claimed to have seen Tamara at a gas station off I-85, but the station's security footage was too grainy to confirm. Another woman said she spotted Tamara riding in the passenger seat of a black SUV, but the partial plate number was useless in the system without more details. Linda's voice became hoarse from sobbing. With each passing day, her desperation grew, and so did the sleepless nights for the entire neighborhood. People began to lose hope. Missing person flyers turned weather-beaten and tattered on lampposts. Some folks, resigned to the harsh reality, whispered Tamara's name, only in cautious hushes, as if they didn't want to invite tragedy into their own lives by acknowledging it. Despite the growing quiet, Detective Brown refused to give up. He studied Tamara's old diaries, her social media private messages, and discovered something interesting, a series of cryptic direct messages from an anonymous account. The messages were affectionate, calling Tamara Little Angel and urging her to keep secrets from her mother. The last message asked Tamara to meet at a specific address near a deserted strip of warehouses late at night. Detective Brown's gut churned. This was no typical teenage chat. The phrases used hinted at grooming someone, manipulating a vulnerable young girl. Brown quickly looked up the address and discovered it was an abandoned textile factory. With Officer Green, he drove out to the location one rainy afternoon. They stepped into the decaying building, flashlights flickering over dusty floors. They found footprints, old footprints, possibly from squatters, but nothing that screamed Tamara had been there recently. Yet, something about the location was too perfectly hidden to be a coincidence. A sense of frustration overcame Brown. In his years in homicide, he had learned that kidnappers could be cunning. They set traps, used old buildings, and changed their operations swiftly. If someone had indeed lured Tamara out here, the place had likely gone cold. Still, Brown snapped pictures, took notes of any scribbles or graffiti on the walls, and asked local residents if they had seen a teenage girl around that time. One man mentioned seeing a black SUV idling near the warehouse about 2 weeks ago, the same black SUV that might have been spotted near the gas station. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to align. The first real break came from a tip line call. A frightened voice on the other end identified himself as Marcus. He claimed he had important information about Tamara's disappearance, but wouldn't talk over the phone. He wanted to meet in a crowded area, so they chose a busy cafe near Centennial Olympic Park. Detective Brown and Officer Green arrived early, scanning the crowd for anyone who looked nervous or out of place. Finally, a lanky young man in his 20s approached them, eyes darting anxiously around the cafe. Marcus revealed that he worked with a group that provided protection services to vulnerable girls and young women. It wasn't an official non-profit, but a grassroots network that tried to protect people who found themselves in precarious situations, often beyond the scope of the legal system. "There's been talk," Marcus said, "about a ring in the area that targets teenage girls from lower-income families. They promise them modeling gigs, better opportunities, but it's all a front for something far more sinister: trafficking." Marcus swallowed hard, his hands shaking around his cup of coffee. "I don't know all the details, but Tamara's name came up." Detective Brown felt his blood run cold. He had suspected the possibility of trafficking from the start, but to hear it confirmed made the danger real and immediate. Marcus went on to explain that the last time he heard Tamara's name, it was mentioned in the same breath as a place called the Blue Phoenix. It was a run-down strip club on the outskirts of town that occasionally served as a front for illegal activities. If the ring was operating there, Tamara could be in grave danger. If they had already moved her, finding her would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Brown thanked Marcus, promising to keep his name out of it. He immediately set to work. They secured a warrant to enter and search the Blue Phoenix, but found the place deserted. Old bar stools lay scattered across a sticky floor, and the stage lights flickered in the gloom. If the Blue Phoenix had once been a staging ground, it wasn't anymore. Local residents confirmed that the place had shuttered its doors the week Tamara went missing. Then another twist. Security footage from a business across the street showed a black SUV parked outside the Blue Phoenix late one night, and the silhouette of a young girl being hurried in through the back entrance. The date matched the evening Tamara vanished. Detective Brown felt his pulse race. They were close. There was no time to lose. As Brown dug deeper, more secrets started to surface, unsettling secrets that hinted at a vast network. Investigating Russell Davis, Tamara's estranged father, proved complicated. Officially, Russell lived in Alabama, but neighbors claimed they hadn't seen him in months. It was as though he had fallen off the grid. Brown put out an APB on Russell, hoping to find him for questioning. Meanwhile, Linda, though devastated, admitted she had tried to keep Tamara's father at arm's length, having heard rumors about his involvement in unsavory activities years ago. In the midst of the chaos, a second piece of crucial evidence found its way onto Brown's desk. An envelope, hand-delivered to the precinct, containing a photograph of Tamara. She looked pale, frightened, and was standing in what appeared to be a dimly lit room with cinder block walls. No note accompanied the picture. It was a disturbing message. Someone wanted law enforcement to know that Tamara was alive, but not necessarily safe. Brown scrutinized the background, noticing a faint reflection in a mirror behind Tamara's shoulder. It hinted at a second figure in the room. He passed the photograph on to forensics for further analysis. Days stretched into nights as the tension mounted. Brown rarely slept. He pored over every lead, coordinated with local agencies, and even used old contacts in homicide to see if any cases overlapped. Meanwhile, Linda was inconsolable, haunted by the thought that her daughter was in danger and there was nothing she could do. Finally, forensics came back with interesting news. The photograph had been printed using an outdated model of a Canon printer, one typically used by small businesses. Traces of a unique cleaning solution used in certain print shops lingered on the paper. Officer Green scoured a list of local shops that might still operate such a printer. After a dozen calls, They found a small family-owned print shop on Auburn Avenue that had recently done a batch of large-format prints for a client named R. Davis. Brown's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Russell Davis was here, in Atlanta, not Alabama. Why had he printed that photo? Was he trying to goad the police? Or was there something else at play? Brown and Green raced to the print shop. The manager recalled a tense man picking up prints late one evening. He paid in cash and seemed in a hurry. He left behind a single scrap of paper with a phone number scribbled on it. The manager turned it over to the detectives. They dialed the number, only to find it was disconnected. But the area code suggested the phone might have originated from the outskirts of Atlanta. A thorough search of phone records eventually linked the number to a burner phone purchased at a 24-hour convenience store. Brown requested security footage from that store, hoping to identify who purchased the phone. With luck, they saw a man in a baseball cap, wearing dark sunglasses, paying cash for a cheap flip phone. The man then got into, of course, a black SUV. The partial license plate matched the earlier sightings. Time was not on their side. Each new discovery confirmed that Tamara was in the grip of a sophisticated network, possibly orchestrated by someone close to her own father. Whether Russell Davis was in charge or a pawn in a larger scheme remained unclear. In desperation, Brown sought the help of a friend in the FBI to track any known trafficking rings that matched these patterns. The intelligence led them to a string of properties rumored to host secret parties, places where vulnerable girls were showcased to wealthy clients. One such property was an estate on the outskirts of Atlanta, near the Chattahoochee River. With the FBI's help, Brown planned a sting operation. Plainclothes officers staked out the property for days. During nighttime surveillance, they noticed expensive cars rolling up the winding driveway, luxury sedans, tinted SUVs, even limousines. The place was heavily guarded by men in dark suits. The stage was set for a daring rescue mission, but it had to be carefully timed. A miscalculation could put Tamara's life in jeopardy. On the night of the operation, Brown coordinated with a SWAT team. They had a warrant, built on evidence gathered from phone records, financial transactions, and eyewitness testimonies. The tension among the officers was palpable as they approached the estate. Adrenaline pumped through their veins. Armed with bulletproof vests and the element of surprise, they hoped to catch the perpetrators unaware. The raid commenced at 2 a.m. A flash of sirens, the thunder of a battering ram against the door. SWAT officers stormed in, ordering everyone to the ground. Screams echoed in the cavernous hall. Men in suits scrambled for weapons, while others tried to run. Officers fanned out through corridors, searching every locked room and every hidden space. Brown's heart hammered as he checked room after room, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. Finally, in a small, barricaded chamber below the main floor, they found a group of frightened young women. Among them was Tamara. She cowered in the corner, her eyes filled with terror, clad in unfamiliar clothes. Tear tracks lined her cheeks, but she was alive. Brown knelt down, speaking softly, identifying himself. The floodgates broke. Tamara threw herself into his arms, sobbing, barely believing she was safe. The rescue operation also liberated half a dozen other girls from similar grim fates. Paramedics were called in to evaluate them, while the SWAT team cleared the property and placed multiple suspects under arrest. As the dust settled, a single question gnawed at Brown's mind. Where was Russell Davis? In the aftermath, Tamara was rushed to a hospital for a medical checkup and to reunite with Linda. A traumatized Tamara recounted how she had been contacted by someone claiming to be a modeling agent. She had confided in her father online, thinking he might have connections. To her horror, she discovered that Russell Davis was no savior. After years of no contact, he re-entered her life specifically to groom her for this horrifying enterprise. Tamara explained that Russell was indebted to dangerous criminals, and as a twisted form of payment, he facilitated the trafficking of young girls, his own daughter included. Tamara's voice quivered as she described how Russell picked her up, urging her to keep it a surprise from Linda. He claimed he wanted to celebrate her upcoming finals and talk about colleges. Tamara believed him, feeling hopeful that at last she could have a normal relationship with her father. Then, everything turned into a nightmare. Russell drove Tamara to a deserted location where men in suits separated her from him. He received a wad of cash. She was locked away, told to cooperate, threatened with violence if she resisted. She overheard bits of conversation and realized these criminals dealt with wealthy clients from out of state who paid for exclusive parties. The night the SWAT team raided the estate, she feared she'd be taken to another, even more secret location. This was the terrifying secret that Detective Brown uncovered: a father who sold his own daughter, part of a larger, well-organized trafficking ring, dealing in human lives as if they were mere commodities. Nothing in Brown's career had prepared him for such a vile betrayal of familial trust. He left the hospital room feeling both relieved to have found Tamara and incensed that someone could commit such a heinous act. The FBI joined forces with the Atlanta police to scour the city for Russell Davis. Every safe house, every known associate, every lead was tracked, but Russell remained elusive. His face was plastered on bulletins and TV segments, calling for the public's help in locating this fugitive suspect. For a time, it seemed he might vanish like a ghost, another monster who slipped away to commit further atrocities elsewhere. But Karma had other plans. 3 months later, a call came in from the Birmingham Police Department in Alabama. A battered, desperate man had been found on the steps of a local church, crying for help. He had gunshot wounds in his shoulder and leg, and the ID in his wallet read, Russell Davis. Local law enforcement recognized him from the national bulletins. Within hours, the Atlanta Police Department was notified, and Detective Brown drove to Birmingham to oversee Davis's arrest personally. Russell Davis had apparently crossed the wrong criminals. According to a fragmented statement he gave between pained gasps, he owed money to the ring's higher-ups. He had tried to extort them by threatening to go public with their secrets if they didn't cut him a larger share. In retaliation, the ring's enforcers beat him, shot him, and left him for dead on the church steps. He was a man consumed by greed and betrayal, and his actions had finally come full circle. Brown watched as paramedics wheeled Davis into a hospital for emergency surgery. The detective felt no sympathy. If anything, he was relieved that this man, who had callously sold his own daughter, would survive just long enough to face justice in a court of law. The months that followed saw Tamara in therapy, her spirit fragile, but her will to rebuild her life unwavering. Linda moved them to a different part of the city, away from the haunting memories. The community rallied around them, raising funds for Tamara's college savings, showing her that love and compassion could still triumph over horror. She was offered a full scholarship from a local charity that helped victims of trafficking continue their education. Slowly, Tamara began to smile again. Russell Davis was charged with multiple counts, including human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy. He stood trial and attempted to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, claiming he had been blackmailed. The jury saw through his lies. Testimonies from Tamara, Detective Brown, and the FBI's evidence sealed his fate. Davis received a lengthy prison sentence with no possibility of parole for decades. In the end, karma struck him harder than he ever expected. His lost freedom was dwarfed only by the crushing guilt of having sold his own daughter. Yet, the story didn't end with Russell's conviction. The broader trafficking ring was dismantled through coordinated efforts between the FBI and local law enforcement. Over the course of a year, multiple high-profile arrests were made, property assets were seized, and many more young women were rescued from dire circumstances. The legacy of Tamara's case ignited citywide reforms aimed at more aggressive measures against trafficking. Agencies pledged new resources, task forces, outreach programs, and heightened cooperation between states. Though the scars of that underworld would linger, there was now a renewed determination in Atlanta's communities to protect the most vulnerable. Through it all, Detective Jared Brown, once worn down by the weight of unclosed cases, experienced a fresh sense of purpose. He had seen the very worst of humanity, but also glimpsed the unwavering love of a mother who refused to give up and the bravery of a girl who refused to let trauma define her. Late one evening, months after the case concluded, Detective Brown found himself in his office. His gaze drifted across the missing persons board. In the past, these unsolved mysteries had weighed heavily on him, but Tamara's picture had been replaced by a new photo, one in which she was smiling alongside her mother, a small graduation cap perched on her head. She had completed her high school requirements thanks to an alternative program that allowed her to catch up despite her ordeal, and was heading to a local community college with plans to transfer to a university later. Brown closed the file with a quiet satisfaction. He felt no illusions that every story ended as well as Tamara's. Too many remained cold cases. Too many families never found their loved ones. But in Tamara Wilson's case, justice was served and a life was saved. That knowledge fueled him for the next day and the next. One life at a time, one case at a time, that was his credo. Still, every now and again, Brown could not help but recall that day they raided the estate. The look of terror on Tamara's face haunted him. How close she came to being lost forever. How easily these traffickers turned human lives into commodities. He also remembered the hush that fell over the city when they first heard a black girl had gone missing. How some people had whispered about stereotypes or runaways, barely giving Tamara a second thought until Linda demanded attention. This drove Brown to push for protocols, ensuring that missing black girls receive just as much urgency as any other missing child case, battling the systemic biases that sometimes delayed responses. He collaborated with local organizations, forging alliances that might prevent another Tamara from slipping through the cracks. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For Tamara, recovery was a daily process. Some days were harder than others. She wrestled with nightmares and flashbacks. But she drew strength from her mother's unwavering support and from the community that raised her voice when hers was almost silenced. She built up her courage to speak out at advocacy events, highlighting the dangers of online predators and the vulnerabilities faced by marginalized youth. Her story, once a symbol of terror, became a beacon of hope, a reminder that with collective effort, even the darkest secrets can be dragged into the light and shattered. To outsiders, Tamara might appear like any other college freshman lugging textbooks, studying in the library, meeting new friends at the student union. But behind her gentle smile lived the memory of a grim chapter she narrowly survived. If she sometimes flinched at loud sounds or took a moment too long to trust a new person, it was only natural. She was doing the hard work of healing, step by cautious step. Detective Brown and Officer Green kept in touch. They occasionally visited Tamara, checking on her progress, quietly proud of her resilience. Linda greeted them like family each time, offering coffee and home-cooked meals as thanks for saving her daughter's life. The visits reassured Tamara that she wasn't alone, that there were good people who genuinely cared about her safety and future. Meanwhile, the criminals behind the trafficking ring faced their own brand of hard karma. The ringleaders, exposed by reams of financial and digital evidence, were indicted and given hefty prison sentences. A portion of the confiscated assets from their illegal operations was funneled into victim support funds. While no amount of money could undo the damage or the trauma inflicted, it provided resources for counseling, medical care, and educational opportunities for survivors. Russell Davis, shackled by his sins, sat behind bars with the knowledge that he had orchestrated the betrayal of his own daughter. Inmates who learned of his crimes showed no mercy. In time, he found himself utterly isolated and alone, precisely the fate he had once tried to inflict upon Tamara. For Detective Brown, that was as fitting an outcome as any. Justice had many shapes, but karma always found its mark. As for Tamara, she never ceased to believe in the promise of a better tomorrow. Every day she woke with a renewed sense of purpose, to live the life she was nearly robbed of. She volunteered at local community centers, spoke out about the dangers lurking behind glossy online ads and too good to be true opportunities. She partnered with non-profit organizations that patrolled social media platforms, seeking to intervene before predators could strike. Her story was proof that even when a person is taken to the brink of despair, hope can still bloom. In the tapestry of her life, those dark threads didn't define her. They simply underscored her courage, her capacity to love and be loved. In a city where the skyline rose tall and proud, Tamara stood even taller. She was living, breathing evidence that the human spirit could not be easily extinguished, not by the shadows of a terrifying underworld, nor the failures of a broken father. She was, in every sense, a survivor. Thank you for staying with Tamara's story until the very end. Her journey shows us the power of community, determination, and unbreakable courage. It's a sobering reminder that missing persons cases, especially those involving vulnerable individuals, demand our immediate attention. It's also proof that justice, while at times slow, can prevail, and hope can blossom in the darkest places. If this story gripped you, made your heart pound, or simply opened your eyes to the realities of human trafficking, please consider sharing it. Spread awareness so that more people understand how crucial it is to protect our young. Stand by those who feel unheard and demand justice for every missing child. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel to support more stories that shine a light on hidden truths. Together, we can help others find hope and keep our communities safe from terrifying secrets lurking in the shadows.